This is a short story about a drive I did in 1977 from Kuwait to Reading in the UK, and it's entitled 4,000 Miles in 7 Days Solo, or An Idiot in a Fantastic Car. I parked the car near the border post offices, and armed with the car's carte de voyage and passport with transit visa all ready, beautifully occupying a full page, I made my way to the building where everybody seemed to be heading. It was mid-morning, the sun was shining, the sky was blue, the journey was going well, and I felt at ease with the world. Once inside the building I queued, Arabic style. Now for those who are not familiar with that style, I shall explain. First, you seek out a person in front of you that is slightly shorter than yourself. You stand behind that person and push a little, so he is pushing against the person in front of him, even harder than he was before. Now you hold your passport and any other papers in the air and start calling out. If you don't speak the language, it doesn't really matter what you call out, so long as you get the attention of someone behind the desk. When you have attracted someone's attention, you reach over everybody's heads and hand your papers to the person behind the desk. In this case, it was a uniformed border official. Once he's taken your papers, you have the right to push forward to the desk. At least, that's the way it worked there. I wriggled my way through the heaving crowd to the desk, where I was pinned against it by the heaving crowd now pushing against me. The officer studied my passport, flicked through to the page where my beautiful full-page transit visa was stamped, studied it for a while, then said, "This visa is for last week. No good now." I was stunned. "What? You mean I have to go all the way back to Kuwait and wait for another week and come back?" "Well, yes." "Ah, come on," I said, "that's not right." "You want to go through?" he asks. "Yes, of course I do." "You want visa now?" he asked. "Yes, please." "Okay, I'll give you visa." At which he picked up a rubber stamp, thumped it down on a new page, and gave me back my papers. "Now I can go?" I asked. "Of course," was his somewhat surprised response. I took my papers and forced a way out through the heaving mass of bodies back to the car. I drove off wondering if I would get stopped by some other official, but that was not to happen, and with no problem I continued on my way and arrived in Damascus nearing lunchtime. In or near the city centre I found a parking space and a cafe where I lunched, again on a local dish of dubious origin, which was definitely not European cuisine, but very welcome all the same. The drive from there to the border with Turkey took me through the towns of Homs and Hama. The roads were quite good, but to the west I could see a lot of military activity between the road and the mountains where the border with Lebanon lies. The troubles in the Lebanon were soon to start. One of the hotels involved in the start of those conflicts happened to be the hotel I stayed in a few times whilst in Beirut. I felt saddened when I later saw it on TV. It had been a beautiful hotel, now pockmarked with bullets and shell holes. I can't remember the name of the crossing point between Syria and Turkey, but it was on the road to the Turkish town of Antakya. By the time I reached the sun had long set, and the night sky was pitch black, and it was turning cold. At the border post I had no problem at all. Straight into the office, passport stamped, and out again. But now I had another no man's land to cross, and this one proved a little frightening. The road was unpaved, narrow, and wound its way through a narrow gorge. I didn't meet any other vehicles, which I found a little strange. On turning one of the many twists and turns in the road as it made its way through the gorge, I saw to my horror a bloke in uniform with an army-type greatcoat over his shoulders, standing in the middle of the road with some sort of automatic rifle pointing at me. I drove slowly towards him, at the same time feeling for the halogen search lamp and making sure I could get a quick, firm grip of it. The lamp had a pistol-type handle with a trigger. Now bear in mind I was driving a car with Q80 number plates, my hair was dark, my eyes are brown, and I was wearing a red and white checked Arabic headdress. I stopped just before I reached him. He walked to the driver's side of the car, maintaining his aim at the windscreen, then poked his gun through the open side window and started gabbling away in Arabic. I reached behind the driver's seat to where I had all the cigarettes, grabbed a couple of packets and handed them to him. He took them, and at the same time I picked up the searchlight, pointed it at him and pulled the trigger. He almost fell over from what I could see, but I couldn't see much because at the same time I gunned the accelerator and released the clutch. I was gone, leaving him blinded by the light with a couple of packets of fags and a face full of dust. About a mile or so further down the road, I turned a corner onto an unbelievable sight. What had been the dead of a very dark night, with no one to be seen other than the poor bloke still probably spitting out the dust and blinking his eyes after being blasted at close range by a lot of watts of illumination, there in front of me was an enormous melee of cars, lorries, buses and every other type of vehicle scattered in an unholy mess over a very large area. Men, women and children were milling around seemingly with little purpose. The whole sight looked chaotic. I parked where I could and asked someone where the office to the border office was. I had to ask a number of people before I found someone who understood what I was asking. I was shown a direction to take and took it. I found the door which looked about right, but it was locked. No one could tell me what was happening, but then I saw a chap in uniform. He spoke a little English and told me I would have to wait until morning and that all these other people wanted to get through as well. I begged him to come and see my car, and with a little hesitation he agreed, but said there's nothing he could do. We got to the car, I leaned inside, took out a full carton of 200 cigarettes and asked him again. He took the carton and told me to go. What, go through? Yes, he said. No passport stamp? Follow me with car, he told me. I followed him. He was walking, me driving, to a barrier where he spoke to a guard who opened the barrier and waved me through. I was in Turkey and in need of a drink, but first I must find somewhere to stop and light up my primus stove. The road was a single carriageway and lined nose to tail for several miles with TIR trucks. Eventually I saw a British truck with a light on in the cab. I stopped and spoke to the driver. He'd been in the queue for 3 days and was expecting to be there for a few more. We had a cup of tea and a chat together before I drove on. It was now getting very late and I needed to stop for a rest, but not before I got well away from the border. Finally, after about 100 miles, I'd gone through being tired and had found a second breath. I saw a sign pointing to the right and signposted Adana. That was the road I needed to get to Ankara. I took it and within a very short distance started a steep climb. It was getting very cold and once again I felt the tiredness creeping over me. I stopped and heated a can of soup on the primus. It warmed me a little and was very welcome. Then, wrapping myself in a blanket, I sat in the passenger seat and tried to sleep. I probably managed a couple of hours before I woke freezing to death. The wind was getting up. Dawn was trying to break through a heavy blanket of dark, threatening clouds. I'd parked in what passed as a lay-by in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing in sight apart from the mountains, which I'd started to climb. With great difficulty I lit my old-fashioned paraffin primus stove and brewed some tea before one of the many stupid things I've done in my life. It was stupid to leave Kuwait with no one knowing that I'd set off. It was stupid to be doing it alone, and now I was about to do something even more stupid.